Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. You are looking at the side opening, the mouth of one of my favorite machines, and those of you who know my channel will not be surprised at all that I couldn't help myself again. I had the opportunity to rescue one of my favorite sewing machines. I have a lot. It's not the only favorite, but it is one of the finest multi-stitch sewing machines ever made and one of the last of the great sewing machines ever made. Those of you who have them and like them will know this, of course. This is the Kenmore 158 1900 series from the early to mid 1970s. This particular model is the 158.1941 model. Now, I've mentioned to you all in the past that these models had they have a tray, and you're going to see me unbolt the tray on this machine. Now, they started with an aluminum tray. Eventually, that tray would be changed over to a plastic tray. And of course, the legs of the machine are still metal and strong, and they support it. The tray is there basically to catch oil and lint, mostly, because this machine was most commonly sold in a carry case. So when you put it on your table, I have it on a table, a card table at the moment, you didn't want stuff going everywhere. So, but this was what you might call, I think what they call in manufacturing, a running change. Running changes are often made in production of anything from automobiles to appliances, where they don't actually change the design really, but they'll substitute something. They'll make a material or a color change. They do this for different reasons, sometimes to sort of freshen things up, to make people think it's new, and in this case, they did it to save on cost. Cost saving can often harm the quality of something. In this case, it's not really an issue for the quality of the machine because all of the mechanical components of this sewing machine are steel, very high quality steel. You know, if a tray is plastic, yeah, it is a cheapening, but it's not really relevant in terms of how long the machine might last. So, you know, yes, it's great to have the aluminum down here, but if you have one of these with a plastic tray, your machine is the same quality, the same strength, the same heirloom durability as this one is. So I don't want to, you know, suggest that somehow you should feel bad, because honestly, most of the 1941s have the plastic tray. And I believe they came later, again, still in production, but someone said, hey, got some cost here, and they didn't want to touch the quality of the actual mechanism. So what did they do? They went down and they replaced the tray with material. And many of you have seen this in all sorts of things that you buy at the consumer level. So one of the things I wanted to show, if you are new to the channel or new to this machine, you might be concerned in that when you look at the top of the machine, let's close the door for a moment and I'll show this to you. Unlike earlier vintage sewing machines, you don't see any bolts. You think, well, how am I supposed to get the top off? Is it sealed? Now, some machines are sealed and you can't remove the top. This one is removable, but they did not include oiling holes, nor did they include a way to just simply remove the top. They were starting already in the 70s to sort of push consumers to, well, you don't want to maintain this yourself. Bring it in and we'll service it. Now that can sound manipulative, and it was, but at least they were still servicing the things that you bought. Now, today, if you buy a high-end modern sewing machine that is mostly plastic, some steel in it, of course, some aluminum, you can still take it into a dealer and be serviced. In fact, you probably have to maintain its warranty. But it is nothing like the level of service that you could get by Sears. Remember, Sears not only was an incredible retailer with great guarantees, they had their own service centers back in the day. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to open one of these. I think I've done this before. So I've got my flashlight. Let's take a look. I'm just opening this machine up, and you can see some dust bunnies. It's not harmful. They need to come out before I oil it and start getting it to sew again. And oh, look what I see here. I see, do you guys see that? Let me zoom in. I see a piece of thread. Now that thread could simply be sitting there innocently, or as I suspect, oh yes, it is wrapped. It is wrapped around one of the one of the little shafts that connects these little roller pieces. I don't know if you call them roller cams. You see the blue there? There's thread in there. Now, I had one recently where the thread was wedged down in there in that crevice. Very often you can get thread tangles or jams in a machine, but you don't always see them here. But I guess I'm on a roll. This is the second one I've seen. Let me get this further in. Look closely. You're going to see blue. Let me get my little, hold on, I get my little tool here and I'll try to specifically point this out to you all. One of the things I like to do when I first get a machine, I don't plug it in and try to run it. No, no, no. What am I doing? What I want to do is get a sense of what's going on with the machine. Inspect it. Make sure that there's nothing obvious like this that could create a problem. So let's come back. Let's get our excuse me, let's get our flashlight and you'll see blue thread. Now, the last time I dealt with this issue, the thread was black. It was really hard to see. But when I come in here, you can see blue thread. Now, so the last thing you want to do is start rolling, moving the hand wheel and getting this thing rolling. You're only going to tighten the thread and make it worse. But before I address the thread, because in this case, this machine has an opening where I can get in above by taking the lid off. Now, the lid, of course, if you've had a vintage sewing machine before, let's close this just a moment, you will, of course, have been expecting maybe, oh, there should be some screws on top so I can remove the lid. Some machines, there is no way to remove the lid. The lid is sealed. That can happen in a vintage or almost every new machine is like that. But with these Kenmores, and it's not just the free arm like the 1941 here, there was a whole series of these machines in the 1970s, and there were flatbed versions, wonderful machines, not as costly because a flatbed didn't cost as much to make. But I believe I've shown this before, but I'm going to show you again. When you want to take the lid off of this machine, there is a specific way to do it, okay, and a way not to. The first thing you'll notice is I've got my take-up arm, right? Normally it can be up here. You want to pull that down, get it out of your way. You do not want to hurt your take-up arm. It will not forgive you if you do. And then I'm going to take, in this case, it's just a simple screwdriver. But what I'm trying to do is leverage, okay, and you're not shoving it all the way in. If you look, you're going to see a little ledge here. This is part of the frame, right? And when you're looking above, you'll see this frame. It's part of the frame of the machine. And if you look closely right here, if I can get out of my own way, right there, you'll see a little, like a beige little, looks like a cylinder, and it's clipping. There's a little metal clip that it's a tension clip. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take, I get enough light on this for you all, and I'm simply going to take the screwdriver, right? And I'm only going to put it as far as this little frame piece, because the frame doesn't keep going. That's fine. And now I'm simply going to push up. Now, if you want to make sure, I don't think I'm going to be in danger of scratching the paint, but just in case, you can take, let's grab a little Kleenex here, put it around there just to make sure. We've got some nice paint on this machine. Why would we take a chance? And I'm going to simply do this. I'm going to put the flat side of the screwdriver, and get it in front of the camera here. Flat side of the screwdriver is down, and it's going to go on top of this little frame piece right there. And I'm simply going to pull up. And what happened? I didn't break anything. If that sound scares you. What happened? I basically took the top of the sewing machine off. And if you look closely, you see, if I can get it up in front of you, what you're going to see here is there are two places where the lid attaches. This little divot, right, is basically a metal, it's basically a metal clip, okay? And when you push down on the little pin on the top of the machine, it clicks in there. And in order to get it off, here's the other one. you have to unclick it, and that's what I just did with the screwdriver, okay? And if you're curious, like, well, where did you click it? Let's come up a little bit and I'll show that to you. Oops. Let's get a... Sorry if I'm making you seasick. It's like being on a ship here. I'm trying to get the camera to pay attention. All right, so let's take a look. Here's the first one right here, right? And that's what that little clipped on do. And then way over in the back, over by where the belt and the pulley is, so you can zoom in, right there. That's the second one, and there's only two, okay? And obviously, the only other thing that is underneath the lid, of course, is your bobbin winder mechanism, right? By the 70s, most manufacturers have moved the bobbin winder up to up on top of the machine for whatever reason. But now that I have the lid off, oh, look what I get to deal with. I get another thread issue that, again, it is unusual, but I've had one recently, and I don't know, I guess I'm just, like I say, I'm on a roll with that, because now I have yet a new, looking for my little tool here, I have a new thread situation, and I definitely do not want to run this machine, do not turn the hand wheel, you know, just you don't want to add to the problem to tighten the thread at all. So what am I going to do? The first thing I'm going to try some tweezers to see what end of the thread I can get a hold of. And now notice I have a thread tail here, okay, but don't pull on it right away. If you say I'm going to get this thread out here and you pull on it really tightly, if you snap it, you might break the thread right at that little crevice where it's wound, and now you've made a problem even bigger for yourself. So let me see. I lost my my turn there. If you take the thread, okay, take the thread and you have it in your tweezers. Do not break the thread. Just hold it lightly, like you would be holding thread tails on a vintage machine, right? And then what are you going to do? You're going to take that. How many hands do I have here? And then what are you going to do? You're going to start turning very slowly your hand wheel and see which way is the thread wrapped around, right? If it's wrapped around clockwise, then I want to go in the backward motion there, right? So that I can start to get that thread off. And so far, I think that's what I'm doing. So again, if the thread is wound, you know, if it's round in one direction, you're obviously going to unwind it in the opposite direction. And that opposite direction, whichever it happens to be, that tells you which way to turn your hand wheel. Because you want, the best way to get thread off of a machine like this is to unwind it instead of pulling and fighting and scratching at it. Because you can do that and you may make things worse for yourself or not. It's one of those weird things you have to kind of wiggle back and forth. And I just thought part of the thread just came out. Now, one thing that's not clear, you can see the piece of thread I just took out, right? It kind of fell out. I didn't break it. I didn't hear it break. And it could be that sometimes you have more than one piece of thread, right? The thread breaks, but it keeps getting wound. It's like a little puzzle. If you've never done it before, you don't need to be a person who's been restoring sewing machines. You really don't. You just need to have patience. If you get in a hurry, which you should never do when you're overhauling a sewing machine, if you get in a hurry, you can make life more difficult for yourself. But I like seeing the long thread. That gives me something to work with, right? Otherwise, you know, how am I going to get a tiny piece of thread that's wedged between these pieces? I don't know. So I don't want that thread to break. I want to work with it, right? You just dance with the thread until you figure out, okay, so I'm pulling it here. Is it going to come off for me in a clockwise or counterclockwise position? And of course, like I've shown before, you know, you've got to get around the rod that's connected to this piece, so you have to come in behind it. So let's see. Right now, the thread is not wanting to come clockwise. So how am I going to do this? I've got to get the thread. Don't want it wound around anything else. And what do I want to do? I want to kind of get the thread back and pull it under I've got to get to it somehow and then pull it, you know, in the counterclockwise position, but I got to get on the other side of this. Now, maybe I can come up and get it higher up. Maybe that gives me a better shot. We will see. This is something that I can't give you a specific. There we go. Okay. So it seems so far to want to unwind counterclockwise. So I'm going to cooperate with the thread, not fighting it. And again, when I started the video, I didn't know we were going to do a video about thread, but lucky. How about that? 2 in a row. Not 2 in a row. I've had another one recently. Again, these machines were designed, they were engineered knowing this could happen, but you definitely want to, sometimes you have to switch tools, and if one tool won't fit where you need it, you can try another one. And the goal is to get this particular thread, get it in a position where you can keep going. There we go. I don't know if you see that. I just got the loop to come over here. Now I go back to the tweezers. Give you a little bit, hopefully a little bit more close-up view. See what I'm doing here. Now I see blue thread hanging right there. So I want to grab it with the tweezers, and again, coming counterclockwise again. And then I have to push the thread behind this rod here, because I can't, obviously it's, okay, I've made progress. So far so good. I'm getting less thread in this section, right? Now I'm going to, oh, and there it comes. Now I have basically 2 long pieces of blue thread that could have really made for an unhappy day. And I was lucky. They were loose, and I didn't go crazy and get in a hurry with them. Now, are we out of the woods? Well, we don't know yet. We're not actually sure. So I'm going to very slowly turn and see do I see any threads popping up anymore, because there can be others. Sometimes a thread is not just one, it could be multiple pieces. So far, when I look over here, I no longer see any thread in right there, right? You see that joint where those 2 metal pieces move against each other. That doesn't mean I don't have thread in there, but I can't see any, and it seems to be moving okay. So fingers crossed that there is no more in that section. So, all right, what else did I promise before I got sidetracked with thread tangles? I believe I mentioned the tray to you all. So let's go back to my original goal for the video and to show you how to remove that tray. Again, removing the tray and especially putting it back is very similar with both the aluminum and the plastic versions, but they are a little different, especially when you put them back, because for reasons that are not only clear to the engineers who created this back in the day, when you reattach the aluminum tray, it fits on a little more easily. With the plastic, you have to kind of finagle, I think is the word I'm going to use here, right? So I'm going to show you, but I've actually removed the deck on a Freon before, but I don't know if I've ever shown it to anyone underneath. So we'll do it if it will slide. So you push in, right? And when you do, it releases. This one released beautifully. If yours does not, it could be that yours is sticky. Somebody oiled it or who knows what. It should come off. Beautifully made, right? Aluminum and steel. So far, looks good. Even has a nice little felt here along the edge to protect the metal. Let's move that out of our way. Now, what have we got? We have the underside of, again, one of the great and one of the last great sewing machines ever built. And let's just confirm, if we can. They moved where they had the model number 158.19411. Sometimes you'll see for 1940, 1942. Again, it could be a model change. It could be, because that's not the serial number, right? The serial number is each machine had a serial number, so they could track it down. And this plate, you know, the new things often have these little decals. They just glue them on. This plate is made of aluminum, and it was riveted. This is they meant business back in the day, folks. They didn't spare expense, not even on the darn plate. I know I geek out on this sometimes, but it never ceases to amaze me how much manufacturers, the lengths they will go to cheapen something to save $1 or so, and they do. But you know, short term versus long term, I guess. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 rubber feet, right? There's a spot here for a rubber foot, and that foot is not there. Well, now there is a potential solution, as long as we don't get anything that's too thick that throws off the levelness. If it's fairly thin, you could try using, say, a very thin rubber washer from the plumbing department. You can glue that on with cement, and that actually is not a bad alternate. However, let's see. I wonder, actually, yeah, I may have to look for a screw for this, because the feet here had screws, and that one's gone. That's probably why the little rubber piece is gone. But again, not tragic, and it's really not an issue. However, I've shown this before, and I want to show this to you all again. This is very important when you are, let's lower it down just a bit more. When you are taking off the bottom of any of these 1970s Kenmores like this, you really have to remember to pay close attention to where the screws that you are unscrewing, because you're going to see screws. Normally you'd have one here too. You're going to have screws where the little rubber feet are. Do not take those off. Those do not come off to remove the tray. And this little area here, there's like a little nut around here. Do not take that off. There are just certain screws you want to mess with, and others you do not. So we'll find the right screwdriver bit. Make sure we are, well, that one seems to fit fine. These screws normally are not extremely tight. Famous last words, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to take this screw, this one, that's 3 on the main wide area here of the plate, and then we have 1, 2, right? So a total of 5, and that's all we're going to loosen. Now, do not lose these screws. Put them on a towel or a tray. Put them on something where they don't go rolling around and falling somewhere, like, I don't know, under a heater duct or something. Don't do that to yourself. That's just not, you know, that is an easily avoidable problem. I'm going to actually put mine in my little screwdriver bit tray. And you want to have all of these off before you start moving your tray. This is important for the aluminum one here. I think, yeah, I am dealing with aluminum. However, if you have the plastic tray, which is totally fine, I would be proud to use a sewing machine like this with a plastic tray underneath, no problem, because it's not structural. It's really just there as a catch basin. So when you do this, it is really important that you remove the tray carefully. You don't want to damage it, and there's an area here, especially with plastic ones, that can be an issue. And if you know ahead of time that you need to be careful, you should not have an issue with damaging. The other thing to note is to remember which screw came from where. Sometimes screws are the same length, but in this case they're not. The one here is longer. If you put all your screws in a pile and you don't remember which one goes where, and you're going to try to, transpose them or something, you'll confuse yourself, and there's no need to do that, right? So take a photo if you can't remember. I've done it often enough that I remember. But if you can, take a picture or draw a diagram. It's not hard, right? That way you'll know what goes where. So now we've got 3 left. Again, these are straight head screws. It's really not until the end of the 70s, 80s where you start to see a lot more Phillips heads. I almost never see Phillips head screws in any of the vintage machines I work on. Just what I've noticed. Maybe they were using them in other products. Now this one, okay, and notice it has a little washer. This bolt, I say screw bolt, has a little metal washer here. You want to keep that because that helps the screw not cause damage to the tray that it is supporting. And then come over and get this one. And again, I'm not having to fight really hard with these. Sometimes you get stuff that's really stuck, but this is not. And again, I'm just putting the, hey, shh, hold on. We're getting commentary on the video. It is entirely possible that this tray has never come off since it left the factory in Japan back in the day, 1974, 75, right around that time. Now, keep in mind that that right now the machine, I have it tilted back on a rolled up old pair of trousers, or you can use anything, a pillow. When the tray comes off, you may want to support the main arm of the machine so you're not fighting against yourself, right? So, what are we removing? Notice that if you grab it by this piece, it doesn't come off because this is attached to the main body. You want to come over here, right? And notice when I take it off, it actually just literally came right straight off in my hands. I have shown, and you can do this if you'll look at some of my other videos, one of the things you will see is that take a look at the tray right here, right in this little area here. There's a curve, and they all have it. Both the aluminum and the plastic ones have this, right? There's a curve. With the plastic ones, there's a little nib or finger, and it has to be put in at a certain angle. It's kind of an odd angle. I've demonstrated that before. And if you don't do it properly, you'll snap it. It'll still go on, but you want it to go on as it was designed, so just be careful. The aluminum, you still want to be careful, but it's not quite as fussy, right, in terms of how it goes off and on. So let's look. What do we see? Oh, you see lint. No big deal. Of course, you're going to see lint down here. This is the area right below the bobbin in the shuttle where all the lint factory, where the lint production happens. And we see some lint. There's a little bit of, I don't know, maybe some old, I just see dust mainly, maybe a little oil there, but not much, okay? In fact, given the dust that I see here, I'm going to guess that maybe it went into Sears once for service. Heck, it may never have been serviced, and the tray may never have come off. It's very possible. You can't always tell with a vintage machine how much it was used. Oh, there's a long dead fly. How it got in there, I don't know. So you never know necessarily by how much dirt you see whether a sewing machine has had a lot of use. Sometimes I can tell, but not always. And I see some broken thread remnants over here, some green, red, blue. Basically, whoever used it last didn't bother to clean the lint, and that's, so what? All sewing machines of this era were designed, they knew they were going to have lint. And again, down here you see all of these mechanicals. You see a lot more going on down here because remember, a sewing machine in this era that could do multiple stitches, all of these fancy stitches were done mechanically. There is no software, there's no computer telling say the needle bar which way to go. It is all done mechanically, and that's one of the reasons they were so expensive to make. You could get a straight stitch machine cheaper, the same quality, but it didn't cost as much because it didn't cost as much to manufacture. And then obviously if you couldn't afford this one, you might have gone along with something simpler, right? All the manufacturers that were of any note, they all had options for their customers. They had to, given the cost that these machines had. Now, while we're down here, let's just take a look. I see dust. Doesn't scare me. I'll be one of the best ways to remove this. In the past, I used to see people talk about canned air. The problem with canned air is, and you may have seen me try to use it before myself in the past, but canned air, it can move dust, but you don't always know where it's going to move it to. So the best thing to do is to take a vacuum. If you don't have the attachment, you can easily buy them. They're called computer electronic attachments for vacuum cleaners. They have I've shown these before, little tiny attachments where you can get in and vacuum. If you don't want to bother with that, just take a brush. You can take a lint brush. You can take, this is a fairly larger size brush, but you can just simply go in and start getting some of the dust out of there. Some of it will stick to the brush itself. It's up to you. I'll probably just vacuum it because it's faster. And what else do we have here? What else can you do while you're underneath the machine? You can learn a lot about a sewing machine just by going underneath. So I'll be doing this in an additional video. When you're accessing the sewing machine motor, and the motors that were at this point, the motors were now being made in Japan to North American electrical specs, very high quality. That doesn't mean they don't wear out. Don't assume yours is perfect. But I have had mostly good experiences with these. There is, of course, a brush cap here, and this is something that I will I'll undo, and I'll show that in a different video because you need to do it a certain way so that the cap doesn't go flying and disappearing forever. The other thing you can do, and we have some natural light here. Let me show this to you. There are two belts that this machine uses. This is one of the things that the Marusan company in Japan that made this machine, this is one of the things they did to basically knock off Bernina a little bit. They ended up with two belts and a pulley that is used as what's called a reduction pulley. The theory is that it can add more torque or power. Now, when you need to inspect the belts of any sewing machine you have. And there's another way to get at these belts, and I'll show you that. I've shown it before when we take the side panel off. And you'll see both belts together. But if you have nice light, you can simply turn your hand wheel, right? And you're looking at the belt, and the belt is under tension, right? Now, this is not the be and end all of belt inspection, but you can at least look. If your belt has obvious cracks or dry rotting, chances are you'll see it because you're seeing it right on the end as it comes around under tension on this motor pulley. Again, that's one spot. You're not done. You're not in the free and clear yet. Don't get too excited. But as what I can tell at this moment is so far the belt looks fine, but I'm not done inspecting it. And you'll see that in another video. But again, you want to know that the belt, at least here, I'm not seeing any flaking or cracking. So far, so good. In my experience, I have come across these Kenmores where the belts were dry rotted and had to be replaced, but usually it's very rare, and I don't know why, because all belts wear out eventually. My theory is that many of these machines were kept in cases and they didn't have as much atmospheric exposure to things like ozone that's in the atmosphere that can break down things like rubber and plastic. And the other thing to note is that the quality of the belts was very high. Do not assume if you have one of these machines that just because you watch this video that, oh, well, the belts are high. Don't assume that because the quality was high that your belts don't need replacing. Very often, if the machine was stored in an attic or, God forbid, a garden shed, and this happens to sewing machines, that can rapidly deteriorate anything, even cords, right? Anything that is not metal, well, actually metal, of course, can oxidize and rust. But in terms of plastics and vinyls, they all age, and they age more quickly when they're exposed to heat. They don't like heat. just doesn't work for them. So anyway, that is something you can look at down here. One thing else before I conclude on this video, I'll just show you when you're down here below, you can look and there are certain things you want to notice. As I slightly turn the hand wheel by hand, now if your machine is locked up, you don't necessarily want to even do it by hand until you've loosened, but this one is moving at least in the vertical needle position motion fine. You can turn it, and as I turn, notice you're going to see a little more light on this. Notice that you're going to see different parts of the machine moving underneath. If you look and you look for something to move and it's not, that's an easy indicator that it's probably locked. Another place to look here is this, of course, this whole mechanism, this little torpedo-shaped piece, is what is used to lower the feed dogs. Now, this is, as I've mentioned many times, most vintage machines that I get, it was rarely, if ever, used, and it's usually locked or stuck. It's not broken, it's just stuck with old oil. It hasn't moved. And this mechanism, some of them are metal. By the 70s, Kenmore was doing the cover to the lever is plastic. And you know what happens if you force plastic, especially old plastic, when it's been sitting. So notice I am gently, very gently with my finger here, I'm just pushing on the lever, but look, this is moving. This is very unusual. I don't know why or how, but it's not stuck. I'm not going to force it, but at least that tells me, you know, I still need to put in probably some alcohol, clean off the old goopy oil, and get some nice fresh oil in there, and it'll be fine. Again, most of you, to this day, you don't really use that feature. A few of you do. But that's why it's often locked up. Again, don't assume it's broken because it's not moving. It's just, it's been asleep for a long time, as I like to say. And I've got, like I say, I've got cleaning in here. I've got dust bunnies. Lint, again, very common. If your machine is like this, you know, there's nothing wrong. It's not a tragedy. It's lint, right? Sewing creates lint. And, you know, maybe some of you haven't cleaned your lint recently. This can all be cleaned up. Do not oil a machine until you've gotten all this lint out, whether you're brushing it or vacuuming it or whatever you're going to do. And a word to the wise, if you decide to do as I'm going to do with a vacuum attachment, make sure that all of your very precious screws are somewhere safe away from the vacuum cleaner. I know that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. So don't tempt fate, folks. Just don't do it. Anyway, again, one of my favorite machines ever in the 10 years of restoring sewing machines. It is a very complex machine, but it is one of the most forgiving. I have had them that were stubborn. I still have the one full of grease that I'm contemplating its fate. But as complex multi-stitch machines go, working on one of these Kenmores from the 70s, it is challenging at times, but it is less, it can be less frustrating than working on a Pfaff or a Bernina, mostly because of parts and the way it was designed. Remember, Sears had their own repair centers. When they talked to the manufacturer about what they wanted, they said, hey, we want to be able to work on this. Don't make our lives difficult. That was not true with companies, many of the European companies, not just Bernina. There are others. But it was just, you know, if you ever work on a European machine, Husqvarna, Bernina, Pfaff, you will understand that it takes more time because of how they were designed. They're not poorly made, they're beautifully made. But working on them is like working on a European sports car. Anyway, thank you all for spending time with me looking at the dusty, lint-filled underside of one of the greatest sewing machines ever made. You don't hear me say that too often, I don't think. I appreciate you watching. Stay tuned, and we'll be talking more about this machine. Of all the videos I've made, other than my many Singer sewing machine videos, this particular series of models and the variations that were all made in this time, you probably see more videos of this than anything, and that tells you something. If I'm willing to spend the hours I do overhauling a machine and finding a client for it, there's a reason, and it's because of the quality that these machines were created with and the fact that so many of them were sold. Sears was such a big retailer back in the day. There were like hundreds of thousands of these produced. I don't have the actual production numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if 1,000,000 of these things came out of the factory at some point. I'm guessing. But there's lots of them, and there's lots of parts to be had still, all these years later. So again, if you have one of these, feel free to comment. If you don't, feel free to comment anyway, and we will see you in the next video.